The head of the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees is warning the people of Gaza are, quote, running out of time and options.
They face bombardment, deprivation, and disease in an ever shrinking space. They are facing the darkest chapter of their history since 1948.
The UN estimates 1.9 million people have been displaced across the Gaza Strip since October 7th. That's more than 85% of the population. The agency's World Food Program says nearly all of those people need food assistance as resources and water run out. Kate Phillips-Barrasso joins me for more. She's the Vice President for Global Policy and Advocacy at Mercy Corps, a humanitarian organization. Thank you so much for joining us. In a New York Times opinion essay, leaders of some of the world's largest global humanitarian organizations, including the CEO of Mercy Corps, said, quote, "We have seen nothing like the siege of Gaza." Describe what that means in practical terms.
Yes, well, as a humanitarian professional who's been, doing this type of work for 20 years, I can say with no exaggeration that this is one of the most extreme situations that I have ever seen. We have 18,000 people who have been killed in a matter of just 2 months, the vast majority of which are women and children. As your piece noted, 85% of people have been displaced in Gaza, often multiple times in a row. And now every man, woman, and child in Gaza, that's 2.3 million people, need humanitarian aid. And there's really 4 factors that combine to make this situation so extreme and so dangerous. The first is that everything from in Gaza came from the outside: food, water, electricity, and that has been cut off now for 2 months. They are also under nonstop aerial bombardment, which is hitting civilian structures and infrastructure. And normally in a crisis like this, people could run away from the violence, but people in Gaza have nowhere safe to go and they cannot leave. And then finally, very little humanitarian aid is making it inside. There's been a lot of news coverage about the trucks going in, but it is not making a dent in terms of that massive humanitarian need. And we fear, as we head into these winter months and people go without these basic elements of life for weeks and weeks on end, that we are going to see a wave of what we call secondary mortality, where we see deaths from basic gastrointestinal disease, from overcrowding in these facilities that they're sheltering in, from lack of food and water. And that will likely make the death toll go up significantly, in addition to the lives lost through aerial bombardment.
So the United States has vetoed a UN resolution backing a demand for a ceasefire. Compare the job of delivering aid with a ceasefire and without.
Right. Well, so as you've seen, there is very little aid going in because of the intensity of the aerial bombardments and ground fighting. So just as there's nowhere safe in Gaza for civilians to go, there is nowhere safe for aid workers to deliver assistance. So we have no guarantees of safety, which means that very little aid can make it in a halting fashion. And since the conflict started again, and a lot of activity has been in the south of Gaza, it's really only in and around Rafah, right up against the border crossing with Egypt, where any aid can be delivered. So as the fighting continues, we will see barely a drop in the ocean in terms of meeting the need. But when we had the humanitarian pause, a lot more aid was going in, and it just demonstrated how much more could be done if there was a sustained cessation of hostilities. So we look at this in very practical terms. It's not an ideological call, it's a practical one. We cannot deliver aid to 2.3 million people who need it unless there is a ceasefire.
And is there anything other than a ceasefire that the global community can do to improve the lives of these civilians?
Absolutely. I mean, we feel like a ceasefire is a fundamental prerequisite, but something that would make a huge difference would be stopping the siege of Gaza. And by that, I mean, electricity has been cut off, water has been cut off. The vast majority of fuel that was needed to run generators, to pump clean water, and run hospitals and provide power to hospitals is not coming in anymore. And this is actually the primary driver of humanitarian need in Gaza. So short of a full cessation of hostilities, turning those services back on and repairing whatever damaged infrastructure that there is would have a huge impact in reducing the suffering going on and making sure that we don't see that enormous wave of excess deaths I was just talking about.
Kate Phillips-Barrasso, Vice President for Global Policy and Advocacy at Mercy Corps. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.